Hey everybody, I am here today to talk to you guys about animals. This week we're going to be learning about animal husbandry and livestock and farming. Now, animal husbandry kind of has a little bit of a parallel history to agriculture, to growing of plant crops. They kind of got started at the same time and in the same place, which was in the Middle East, in the Fertile Crescent area, 10 to 15,000 years ago. Animal husbandry is the branch of agriculture concerned with animals that are raised for meat, fiber, milk, eggs, or other products. This includes the day-to-day care, selective breeding, and the raising of livestock. Husbandry has a long history, starting with the Neolithic Revolution when animals were first domesticated, around 13,000 BC onwards. That predates farming of the first crops, but really it's around the same time. By the end of the early civilizations, such as ancient Egypt, cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs were being raised on farms. There's a timeline of animal domestication. Notice that the dog is much older, actually, than any of the cultivated livestock that humans have bred. I feel like the relationship between dogs and humans is a little bit different. Factors in the success of domesticating a species. So why did these species become domesticated and not other species, other wild animals? What allowed these to become domesticated? Well, generally we talk about four things that play the biggest factor in why certain wild species become domesticated and others don't. First thing is their usefulness. How useful are they to people? Second thing is, do they thrive in captivity? Can they handle being around people? Can they handle maybe being fenced in or living in a barn or another building? So they have to be able to thrive in captivity. Successful breeding. So sometimes breeding, especially breeding in captivity, it doesn't work. They have to be able to actually not only survive in captivity and thrive, but also be able to make babies in that situation. Otherwise, that's not an animal that can be successfully domesticated. And easy to tend. So all those other things could be true, but if the animal is going to kill you when you go to feed it or take care of it, then maybe it's not so great to be a domesticated animal. So you kind of need all these things to have success domesticating a wild species. Okay, so for rearing animals, let's talk about the four main things that we always want to look at when we're raising animals. Okay, so first thing, what is their natural habitat? And in most cases, this means what is the natural habitat of their wild ancestors? Because we kind of want to reproduce that as much as we can. Second thing is their behaviors, which is closely related to their natural habitat. What kinds of things do they normally do in nature or in a natural environment? What are their behaviors and how can you take advantage of those behaviors, both so that they live happy lives doing the things that they instinctually want to do, and so that you can use those natural behaviors to your benefit as a farmer. Diet. What is their natural diet? That's super important. If you're not feeding them their natural diet, it's really hard to keep them healthy. And then uses. Finally, we want to think about what are we using this animal for or these animals for. We always want to keep that in mind as in terms of the systems that we set up to raise them. So we're going to be talking about four groups of animals: poultry, which includes chickens, ducks, geese, turkeys, and any other bird that is raised for agricultural products. Ruminants, which are cows, sheep, goats, and anything that's related to them, antelope, deer, those are all ruminants. But cows, sheep, and goats are the main domesticated farm animals. Non-ruminant herbivores, so this includes horses and donkeys. It also includes rabbits and guinea pigs, less important agricultural animals, but still somewhat important. And the last group is monogastric omnivores, which the main farm animal is pigs. Dogs are also monogastric omnivore, and also human beings are too. Poultry. So our first group is poultry, and I'm going to use an example for every group. In this case, the example is going to be chickens. But poultry are domesticated birds raised for meat, eggs, or feathers, and includes chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, and others. Okay, so our example is chickens. Chickens, in their natural habitat, chickens are descended from wild forest fowl who lived in environments rich in a diversity of foods like seeds, leaves, shoots, bugs, grubs, and grit. Grubs are little larvae or worms, maggots, things like that. And grit is mineral matter, so it's usually sand or gravel. And this is actually something that's an important part of a bird's digestive system. They evolved to nest up high in trees and cliffs away from predators. Turkeys are similar to chickens, though they're more adapted to forest or field edges and are considered more suited to pastures. Ducks and geese are waterfowl and thrive in aquatic and adjacent environments, foraging on a varied diet of grasses, water plants, mollusks, insects, worms, slugs, and small amphibians, grubs, and more. So, looking at the chicken's natural behavior, you can watch this video real quick for a minute. One of the first things that you're going to notice about chicken behavior is scratching. Okay, and chickens scratch. See that the chicken's kicking? They're kicking up the leaves. Now this is a chicken playground right here. These chickens are in heaven. They have a mulch layer, and then underneath that mulch layer are all kinds of bugs and seeds and things for them to pick at. And chickens will do this all day. Now, one thing, did you notice, watch when this chicken, you see how its mouth is kind of part way open? That's actually a sign that the chicken is hot. They don't sweat, but they keep their mouths open to cool themselves down. So that can be a sign that the chicken is overheating a little bit and that it needs water. But scratching is the main behavior that we want to keep in mind when raising chickens, because they will do this all day long and be happy as can be, scratching and pecking. And I'm going to post this slideshow so all you guys can see if you want to see the other links, the other animal behaviors. So the diet. Birds have a digestive system that is designed to digest hard, dry, and dense foods like seeds and insects. Their digestive organs, specifically the crop and the gizzard, which we'll see in a second, are suited to soaking and then grinding hard and dry foods before digesting. They are closely related to reptiles and similarly don't have a separate urinary and digestive tract, hence their manure is especially high in nitrogen and phosphorus. which would normally be released through urination in mammals. So mammals like us, we have two holes. When we urinate, a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus is released through the urine, along with a lot of water. In poultry, like in reptiles, all of that nitrogen and phosphorus gets included in their manure, so their manure is especially high in those two elements. That's why a lot of people like to use chicken manure to fertilize, because of its high nitrogen and phosphorus content. And when I talked about the grit being part of their diet, sand and gravel, that is for the organ called the gizzard, which we'll see in just a second. So here's the chicken's mouth and the esophagus, the crop. This is where hard bits will collect, hard things like seeds and bugs that are too hard to digest. They will collect here and they will soak. They will get mixed with digestive fluids and get in there and swell up and soften. And then they will go into the gizzard. Now, the gizzard is this really muscular organ, and this is where grit that the chicken will pick up collects in the gizzard, and it helps to grind up those grains that have been soaked. So it's a process. It's like a little bread making factory. You have where the grain gets soaked, and then where it gets ground up. Then it can be digested. And again, right here, crop, soaking chamber for hard, dry foods, and the gizzard, with the help of grit, is a grinding chamber for those hard foods. And here is the cloaca, which is the back entrance for basically everything. They not only pee and poop out of that hole, but they also lay their eggs out of that hole. So it is one hole to do all those functions. Okay, and then the uses. So with chickens, mainly the two types of chickens that it's categorized in these days are broilers and layers. Broilers are chickens that you raise to slaughter young for meat. Layers are chickens that are raised to lay eggs. And the way that you raise them, the breed of chicken, and the type of feed that you give them are all different. And here's some examples of broiler feed versus layer feed. Broiler feed has a higher protein content and encourages chickens to grow bigger faster. Layer feed is lower in protein and is more of maintaining proper balance of protein, calcium, vitamins, and minerals, because they're putting out a lot of vitamins and minerals in the eggs that they're laying, especially calcium. Here is a little graphic that can show you the innovations in chicken breeding. So the chicken of 1957 at 56 days old. 56 days. So we're talking less than 2 months, right? We're talking, what is that, 7 weeks? 7 weeks old. Back in 1957, that was the size. In 78, we had made a lot of advancements. And then in 2005, we have this, this thing right over here. And most of that increase in meat is in the breast, because Americans love that breast meat. Okay. Next group of animals, before we get into ruminants, we're going to do a couple definitions. So herbivores, you might know, are plant-eating animals that get their nutrition from grazing and browsing on plants. Okay, so grazing is grass and things that are growing on the ground. Browsing is usually trees and shrubs, taller plants. And different herbivores do rely more on grazing or browsing, depending on what they are. And ruminants are a type of herbivore that have a specialized digestive system that works with bacterial fermentation inside the organs that can digest cellulose more efficiently. Now, cellulose is something that we can't digest really at all. It is plant fiber. It's what paper is made out of. It's what straw is made out of. And when you look on the nutrition facts on a food label, when they talk about insoluble fiber, they're talking about cellulose. So, ruminants and non-ruminant herbivores, to give some examples. Ruminants are cattle, sheep, goats, water buffalo, yaks, reindeer, antelope, and more. So these are animals that are the most efficient at digesting grass and fibrous material, roughage, right? They can actually digest that into energy. There are non-ruminant herbivores like horses, camels, llamas, alpacas, equine hybrids like donkeys, or sorry, like mules are a hybrid between a donkey and a horse. And donkeys, rabbits, and guinea pigs are all in this group. Now, non-ruminant herbivores have varying degrees of effectiveness at digesting that cellulose, digesting roughage. Some are better at it than others. Some of the best ones are llamas, alpacas, camels. Rabbits are pretty good too. Donkeys and horses, maybe not so much. And it just depends on how their digestive system is organized. Now we're going to talk about ruminants. So our example is cattle. First, we're going to look at the natural habitat. Cattle descended from wild grazing ruminants in Africa and Asia. They're evolved to eat a mix of grasses, legumes, and forbs. They are herd animals that migrate in search of green pastures. So they're really animals that are designed to graze on pastures. They herd in big groups, and they can protect each other. They can protect their young that way, and they're designed to be mobile and continue to migrate in search of better pastures. So let's watch really quickly a little bit of cattle behavior. So, like I say, ruminants are absolutely designed to eat grass all day. One thing you're going to notice, other than the fact that there's a lot of cattle here and they're very happy together, is that ripping motion. They use their tongue and they rip the grass off in big mouthfuls. They will eat all day long. That's what they're designed to do. And yet, now you see that some of the cattle are sitting down and chewing. So they're chewing their cud. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But they do this a lot too. A lot of the cattle will sit down for periods of time and they will kind of burp up chunks of grass that were in their stomach and then chew on it again and re-swallow it. So keep that in mind. I want to show you one more video. So check this out. These are not just cows. There's actually goats and cows together in this pasture. Now, when this farmer moves his strands of electric fencing, you're going to see how these animals, both goats and cattle, are really, they feel safest when they're moving in a big group together. And so they're not meant to be solitary animals. They're meant to live in groups and they're meant to move in groups. And they love moving from this pasture here, where the grass has already been eaten and stomped down, to new pasture here. This is called mob grazing, where you're moving the animals in quick succession. So they'll stay for a few days on one pasture, on a small pasture, eat it all down, and then a few days later you move them to green pastures. They love this type of grazing. They're very happy in a system like this. So keep in mind what we just saw, and now look at the ruminant digestive system. So right here is where the food comes in. This big, huge organ right here is the rumen. This is where bacterial fermentation starts to go to work on all the cellulose in that roughage, in all that grass and leaves and things like that. It starts digesting it, goes into the reticulum, into the omasum, and the abomasum, which is essentially the stomach. But this little part right here, the reticulum, this is going to catch material that is too fibrous to go through the rest of the digestive system. And what this is going to do, it's going to bypass the omasum, and it's going to go back up the esophagus, back into the mouth, and it's going to get chewed as cud. Now, this is something that only ruminants do, is chewing cud. So their natural diet we've talked about. It's roughage, it's grass and weeds and clovers and all those kinds of things. In addition to that, obviously, they need water. And this is a salt lick, which provides some minerals. Now, in nature, ruminant animals like this will find sources of natural minerals if they need them in their diet. Sometimes they will find soil or clay deposits that have the right minerals, and they'll eat those. But that's another factor in their diet. And finally, uses. So there are so many uses for cow parts. This is a whole exhaustive list. You guys can pause the video and take a look at it if you want. The other thing I want to talk about is there are usually meat cattle and milk cattle, just like there are broiler chickens and laying hens. There's meat cattle and milking cows. Back in the day, before modern agriculture, most cows were dual purpose, so they would be milk animals and meat animals eventually too. But the way that you raise those animals, the diet that you give them, the feed, right? Those things will be different depending on if you're raising them as quickly as you can for meat or if you are trying to maintain their milk production. Okay, so non-ruminant herbivores. This is the group that we talked about that includes horses, donkeys, camels, and a bunch of other herbivore animals that are not ruminants, that are not cattle, sheep, and goats. So the example that we're doing is donkeys. Their natural habitat are dry, arid areas, and so they're especially hardy animals. They can go for quite a while without water, and they can live off of pretty low nutrient and low moisture foods. Their natural behaviors, they are also herding animals, and they love to graze and browse, and they take dust baths. They are social animals like cattle. Their natural diet, like I say, is both grazing and browsing, right? So eating things off of trees and shrubs as well as grass. Their digestive system is quite different. And if you look at it, this is where the food goes in. Here's the stomach right here and the small intestine. And then there's this big organ called the cecum. Now, this is essentially kind of like a rumen. It functions in a similar way, except it's further down the digestive system. Notice this is post small intestine, where the fiber that hasn't been digested yet will collect in the cecum and then get somewhat digested, and then it'll go through the large intestine and out. So they're definitely better at digesting roughage than we are, than like a monogastric omnivore like us or pigs, but they are not as advanced as a cow, as a ruminant. And their uses, well, labor is the main use for donkeys around the world, but they are used for milk, meat, and other products in other parts of the world mainly. And you can see they're known for their work ethic and their strength. So, a little word about donkey hybrids. A male donkey, called a jack, can be crossed with a female horse to produce a mule. A male horse can be crossed with a female donkey, a jenny, to produce a hinny. Okay, so the horse-donkey hybrids are almost always sterile because of genetics. Basically, horses and donkeys are different species, but they're closely enough related that they can have offspring, but they can't have fertile offspring. Mules are much more common than hinnies. So a male donkey father and a female horse mother is a much more common cross, mainly because the horse is a larger animal, so therefore it can carry the child of a donkey no problem, but a donkey mother is smaller than a horse, so there would be a lot more danger in a donkey mother carrying the child of a horse, because a horse is going to be a bigger baby and the birth is going to be more difficult. Either the mother and the baby, one or both of them could die during the birth. And then there's a little bit more about zebra donkey hybrids, which is pretty interesting. Please feel free to check that out. Our last group are the monogastric omnivores, which the main farm animal is pigs, but it does include also dogs are in that group too, and we are also monogastric omnivores. Now, pigs. Pigs is our example for monogastric omnivores, and their natural habitat, we can look at wild boars and warthogs in different parts of the world, but they love to forage for food. They love to dig around, whether it is in leaves or mud or snow or dirt. They love rooting around and finding different kinds of foods. They do some browsing and collecting of fruit as well, but their favorite foods are nuts, berries, roots, grubs, worms, and things like that. And some of their natural behaviors linked to their environment are that rooting behavior. They love to tear up the ground. They also love to wallow. Wallowing has a bunch of benefits. It can cool them down. It can prevent parasitic bugs like ticks and fleas from living on them. And it's just fun for them to get in the mud. Looking at other natural behaviors, they do live in smaller groups, not herds, but they're usually like a family group that could be as many as 20-something or 30-something pigs in the wild. They tend to have large litters. Their natural diet, again, we can see roots, bugs, worms, grubs, fruits, nuts, anything they can find on the ground or under the ground, pretty much. Oh, and going back to this, again, all these animals, when we think about their diet and their natural behaviors, I want you guys to think about ways that these natural behaviors could actually be used to help you as a farmer, especially if you're rotating these animals through different pastures. There's a traditional system that I heard about a long time ago where you grow the Jerusalem artichoke, which is a root crop, very easy to grow. It's planted in a pasture the prior year, and then the next spring, the pigs are led into the pasture, and they basically root up the whole ground looking for the tubers of the Jerusalem artichoke, and in the process, they tear up the whole ground and basically till it. And then you move the pigs out of the pasture, and then you can plant your garden or your field crops. And this is one example of ways that you can use an animal's natural behavior to do the work for you as a farmer and to maybe prep the ground for growing of other crops. So pigs are used for a million different things. It's pretty crazy what they're used for. Go ahead and pause it and read all the things that the different parts of the animal are used for. And there's other types of livestock or animals that are grown for different purposes. In these pictures, you can see fish for aquaculture. You can see silkworms on the top right. You can see crickets grown for food, and of course, honeybees. And there's a lot of other animals too that are more obscure that are grown for different things. In conclusion, when we talk about animal rearing, animal husbandry, and raising livestock, we always want to consider those four things. What is the animal's natural habitat and its natural behaviors and its natural diet? These are the things that are going to allow the animal to be happy and also allow us to really utilize their services. And then we also want to consider the uses of that animal. We always want to think about that when we're raising them so that we are providing them the right type of diet and other things so that the products that come from them in the end are the best quality that they could be. And again, utilize your animal's natural instincts to the fullest. This is going to make raising them easier, and it'll also make them happier. Animals that get to display their natural behaviors that aren't confined to a life of disease and solitude, but actually get to live out the natural life of whatever type of animal they are happier, healthier, and then when we do finally harvest them, they've had a full, happy life. All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. And again, I will post this slideshow for you guys to look at the individual slides and be able to hit those links.